Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm Geoff Pender. I'm here today with my colleague, Bobby Harrison.
Hey, Geoff. Well, you and I hadn't been together for a while.
It's been a minute, I guess.
Yeah.
We've had differing schedules on this podcast. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We have as our guest today, also no stranger to this podcast. He's been on several times, I believe. We have Representative Robert Johnson. Welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You talk about being on this podcast, and you and Bobby hadn't seen each other in a while. This is the first time it's been the old man's group. Usually it's
somebody
that's right.
Young,
Taylor or somebody
younger. Yeah, I guess so.
What
are you saying?
Hey, I'm saying it about myself. You guys are younger than me.
No, I'm not.
I don't think I am either, but
I'm
anyway.
Sure
Anyway, Representative Johnson is the House Democratic leader.
Yeah.
And you serve District 94, correct?
That's
and that's
correct.
Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson counties.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And you've been in there since 2004.
I've been in the House since 2004 and was 11 years in the Senate before that.
I was going to say I knew when he was in the state Senate.
Yeah. People still call me Senator. I said, that's okay. You can do that.
Right.
You're just aging yourself when
They
you do
still
that.
call Scott Delano representative.
Senator, that's right.
And he asks if it pleased the House when he gets up to the mic all the time.
But what's the old joke? If you say, hey, Senator, 52 members will turn around and look.
Right.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, we're here today kind of as the dust settles on the 2025 legislative session, one for the books.
Yeah.
Maybe not in such a great way, but we haven't, I don't believe, had you on since the end of it. So how would you grade the 2025 regular session?
I would grade it as a D-.
Just
barely
passing.
Just barely passing. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a frustrating session in a lot of respects. It always is when we get caught up into ideologies and instead of focusing on the issues that really matter to people that will really affect somebody's life. Now, some people would disagree with me about that, but I don't think that school choice is a life-changing issue for people in the state of Mississippi. And that's evident by the fact that we couldn't get it out. But we spent a lot of time trying to pass that. Sports betting is supposed to be such a big deal, but there are a lot of negatives about it. But at the end of the day, it is not the transformative idea that people need or they need to see happen in the state of Mississippi. And when we spend all our time on issues that are promoted by a certain special interest, it just makes it a frustrating session because we ignore things we ought to be taking care of.
Of course, the big thing to come out of this session was the tax bill, and that wasn't a very pretty process.
No, it wasn't, and I didn't mention that one because I knew the question was coming.
Right.
That was the elephant in the room of the whole session. That we spent a great deal of time dealing with that, and that's frustrating too. I continue to say, I don't know. A tax cut of this magnitude would probably work in a state that's rich in resources and money like Texas. But in a state that is poor as the state of Mississippi, where there are areas that we have perpetually every year neglected in terms of, reinforcing their ability to create jobs or to keep people there or help their infrastructure. And I'm talking about areas along the river, and there are places in southeast Mississippi, the same thing, that we need to focus some attention on. And we didn't do any of that. And we started talking about, build back Mississippi with a tax cut. And I said to the chairman of Ways and Means, so how are we going to build it back? Where are we going to get the money to build it back with? He said, we're going to get it from growth. And that keeps ringing in my ear because I keep thinking, well, we just cut the growth. So where are we going to get it from? So, yeah, it was frustrating in that sense.
Yeah, you mentioned Texas, and could maybe have sold this, but no state, I don't think, maybe are passing tax. I mean, Texas has a different revenue stream, but you don't see Texas making cuts that cuts 30% of their revenue out of the revenue stream to take away from their budget.
I just don't. even in states where they've tried this and it has failed miserably, at least they recognize that there has to be some balance. But they didn't do any of that with this.
Well, and oddly enough, I mean, the way this shook out with the typo in the bill and that being seized upon and passed, but both original versions of the income tax bill had some safeguards or some offsets in it. The way it shook out, all those got killed, basically, whether you agree with them or not.
That's pretty irresponsible. I always harken back in 22, Philip Gunn contacted me and said, "Look, we got a tax cut." I said, "I'm not in favor of a tax cut." He said, "Well, sit down and look at this one." And I had some experience working on the 2008 study that Haley Barbour commissioned, and I knew there was a way to cut income tax, cut grocery tax, and still have a zero impact, or what they call it, revenue neutral. And we did that. I mean, we give away about $1 billion or more in tax exemptions. In 2008, it was about $800 million, but it's much more than that now. And so we found a way when we looked at that bill to, if you cut this much out of your budget, and it wasn't a third, which is ridiculous, but whatever we were cutting out of the budget, we would replace it with something. And people raised enough hell that special interests, corporations who had the money, raised enough hell in the Capitol. That didn't happen. We ended up not having a revenue-neutral tax cut that I didn't vote for. We ended up cutting taxes to the tune of, right now, it's up to $596 million a year. But nothing to replace that with. And there is no state in this country where when you cut that amount of tax, that something has to give. You're going to cut budgets, but at some point we're going to raise somebody's something.
Or local governments having to
it's got to happen.
Property taxes.
Yeah. Well, you're right. In this tax bill, you are raising taxes. You're making,
that's true.
For a lot of people, for senior citizens and certain elements of the poor.
Right.
But getting back to Geoff's alluding to the typos in the bill that so much has been written about. Have you? I mean, you're an attorney. Have you read the bill? What does it say to you, in your opinion?
Well, when I read the bill,
people interpret it different ways.
I don't know how any other way you can interpret it. Not only did they write it at 0.85 hundredths of a percent, they wrote it out and spelled it out at 0.85 hundredths of a percent, which means the trigger essentially comes into effect. You don't have to have a surplus, essentially.
Yeah, but if you read it a certain way, not the 85. I mean,
when did it come into effect? Yeah.
The cut is only not on the rate, but just on the percent of the growth,
right?
And it would just be a minimal tax cut based on that. And I'm getting too far in the weeds, and I apologize.
And I don't think anybody's going to interpret it that way.
Well, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a tax lawyer. But what I will tell you is that I went to the people in the budget office and the economists and the people I talk to, and that what you just described is not the way they see it.
Okay.
They don't think that's the way it works.
Okay.
Because they express their concern and afraid that we got a bill in place now that's not permissible. It says this is what you have to do, and that we're going to be looking at some pretty serious cuts unless we make some corrections earlier than we want to.
You have been a long time proponent of providing more money for education. Not for education too, but for transportation, which this bill does.
Yeah.
It what is it, 9 cent increase index?
3 cents a year.
Yeah.
3 years.
But that's you could argue that's a tax that's going to greatly impact poor people more. There was actually ways to do the increase for transportation other than the excise tax.
We've looked over the years. We looked at several different ways. Now, the excise tax made sense simply because we hadn't raised it in 25 to 30 years. That's why it made sense. But we're also in a different age now that you can't solve that problem just by raising the excise tax. You have to look at what you're doing with electric vehicles, and you also consider the other reason that this 9-cent increase doesn't make any sense. We're cutting 2/3 out of the budget. So as I continue to ask them, if you're going to cut that much out of the budget, the money that transportation is already getting is going to have to be cut. So you're not really adding on, you're just increasing the tax on working people at a place where they don't have a choice, where they have to pay this money. But you're also not really helping transportation because about 50% of our budget comes from the federal government, and they're cutting a lot of that money. And then you consider that it's our contribution to that is going to get cut out of our budget. I don't know how you can't continue to fund transportation at the level you're funding them, and then increase the gas tax and give them more money. And I mean, the two just won't work.
That gas tax, one thing that doesn't get talked about very much, after that 9 cents comes in the out years after that, there's an index tax on
Right. It's
going to be about a cent.
Well, it depends on
it capped at a cent.
It capped at a cent, but it'll move based on the rate of inflation or the rate of construction costs.
Construction. Construction.
There's a highway construction index that they can tie.
So we're going to see increases beyond
you will.
9 cents on gasoline.
Yeah. Look, the biggest problem I have with the increase, I've introduced bills to increase the gas tax because when you look at the net gain, I mean, people actually, when you consider how much money you spend on going out of your way because of bridges and roads that are bad, and the toll on your car, it ends up being a net savings. But all that aside, the reason I can't justify it now is the people in the Delta and west of I-55, they don't have any work to drive to. I mean, and if they drive to work, they're driving to Madison, or they're driving to Jackson, or they're driving to Marshall County now. That on people who are already poor is an extra burden, and so we just should have figured something else out.
Yeah, well, I know y'all don't pay attention to what happens in the Senate, but Senator Bryan had a amendment that, of course, didn't pass that would have said, okay, if we're going to cut the income tax, let's take some of that, instead of cutting the income tax, divert some of that money from the income tax to transportation and don't do the excise tax, because for the very reason you said, because of people driving long distances to work. And
well, I didn't know he had done that, and that's an excellent idea. And I've said similar things, not as artfully as I'm sure he has put it. But I said it does make sense. I mean, the money we're cutting out of the budget, and then on top of that, we're raising gas tax. You could just pay for the roads. You could just, in certain areas, you definitely could just do that. So.
Back to, I know a lot has been said about this, but the typo being seized upon and passed into law and signed into law, that just, a lot of people think that just seemed like dirty pool. It went around the Democratic representative process. What's your take on that, on how that happened, and
well, I'm probably
who knew what when,
Well, the leadership in the House knew it. They didn't do it blindly because we have an excellent legal staff, and it was pointed out to them, so they knew. They made a decision on how they would do it, and I'm probably going to get in trouble. I mean, I shouldn't, because I'm 66 years old, and when I say that was just an infantile high school move, it just seemed silly to me. It just seemed, that's not what a mature legislator. If you have a beef or you have something you're trying to get done, you just don't send a bill that has those kind of errors in it to the governor. And then for the governor to sign it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the governor has line item veto power, which means the governor can essentially fix things, or he could send it back for corrections. They made their point. I'm gonna send it back, so I need you to fix this. So none of that. All is like it's like people playing chicken. I mean, these are the lives of the people of the state of Mississippi we're talking about. So I thought it was kind of silly.
Well, I mean, typo or not, we've all been there for a while. How often do you see a bill of that magnitude go to the governor without going to conference to
never
to look at those types of things, just because drafting legislation is tough, and getting that stuff worked out is tough, and that's why those bills go to conference sometimes, just to try to make sure they hadn't made any mistakes.
That's one of the main reasons you do it. Yeah. But on top of that, we had about 3 to 4 incidences after that. And 2 of them out of public health, where he went and asked for unanimous consent to fix a typo in a bill.
Yeah.
Both sides,
right.
Senate
so it's not a difficult thing to do.
House bills.
Yeah, we could have fixed it. Yeah.
Well, back to something you mentioned before, after this tax cut or whatever, the money that is left after that.
Yeah.
One thing you and I have talked about a good bit here recently, and you mentioned before, the disparity in how that money is spent.
Yeah.
You and I have talked some about economic development spending. building industrial parks or helping areas that need growth or whatever. You and I have talked a good bit about that, but the disparity in the way that's being spent right now.
Yeah, that's a very serious issue to me, and even some of my Democratic colleagues get frustrated because they say you spend a lot of time talking about that. I say, well, what I've observed in the 30 years I've been here is that economic development and investment is purposeful. You decide you don't do it because you don't invest in Madison County just because it's a growing county. It has to start somewhere. But all that aside, you can decide that you want to see this area grow. Land is cheap, labor is cheap. We can build something here and people will come. But they do that in areas around the state. But they don't do it in areas. And I'll just say this: where African Americans live, they just don't. They don't do that. And west of I-55, you can count Continental Tire as an economic development project west of I-55. When I consider that $145 million went to the smallest school district in Hinds County, and that's Clinton Public School District. Nobody cares about creating any equity in how we spend money. The governor has something called an industrial project. I can't think of the exact name, but essentially he has access to money. His office does, where he invests in industrial sites to try to beef them up to do something. And there are 3 counties, and I don't have the map in front of me, that are Union. I can't think of all, but there are 3 majority white counties that are poor counties that need that kind of help, that have gotten more money for those projects than the entire Delta. And so I also had Peer do sort of a cursory look at statistics over the last 5 years and where the state has spent its economic development and its infrastructure money. And 70% of that money has been spent in counties that are majority white and only 27 to 28% in counties that are majority black. Now, somebody can say, well, to the political victor goes the spoils. Some of that may be Democrat or Republican, but I can tell you, I've seen it happen under Democratic leadership as well. And I just think that the old adage that you're only as strong as your weakest link is what we need to focus on. I grew up, my grandfather worked on the river. He was a Corps engineer. And I grew up, and I may be wrong, but everybody's always told me this, the river is a big economic development corridor. It's a big asset. And why are we ignoring the ability to take advantage of all those towns along the river where you can transport goods up and down the river, run rail east to west, build highways, just a great connector. I don't know why we hadn't done that, and I can only look to one thing, but I'm reticent to always call it out that way, but that's what I see. I don't think you throw Greenville and Natchez and Port Gibson. I just don't think you throw those cities away.
Well, they're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere, right?
Until we're going to continue to be last in the nation in so many categories until the entire state is.
That's the only reason we're last, because there's such a disparity. I was going to say,
I've heard state leaders in the past say, well, if we could just cut out the Delta from our statistics, we'd be doing fine.
Right,
well,
right.
Okay,
you can't do that. It's not how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
But the sad thing, they also talk about tourism, and I would argue that when you have out-of-state tourism, most of the time it's coming to a lot of time it's coming to the Delta for the.
It's coming to the river. The tourist attraction in Mississippi is the Mississippi Gulf Coast and everything along the river.
Yeah.
Everything else, there may be some other things you can throw in there, but people want to come along. They want to get on the river. And I always said, you got Route 66 in California, but if you had a river road highway that people would come, they would rent a car in Memphis and just traverse that area. Yeah. And it would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, they already do it, but they could. Yeah. They could do it. With limited efforts to get them to do it.
Right. There'd be more places to eat, more places to stay, more things to do. All that would work. Yeah.
Well, one thing I think I talked with you about the other day. At some point during this session, we had there was a group of county supervisors and mayors, a good many of them from the Delta, some maybe from the Southwest, and. They were talking about some of the money that's available from the state or maybe even federal for economic development, for building an industrial park where they might attract some jobs or whatever. Their conundrum is they've got to put up local money.
Yeah.
And for a lot of cities, it would be nothing, coming up with $3-4 million
Right.
to put in your local share. But
Yeah.
some of these leaders were saying, look, our tax base is such that we can't come up with $3 or $4 million.
That's correct.
And it's a vicious cycle. You
Right.
can't build it, so they won't come.
Yeah.
Seems like that's something that needs to be addressed.
I feel about that the same way I feel about public education. If there are areas in this state, that you go back and look in the 1920s when they first wrote the public education bill, and the idea was a child should not be penalized based on where they live. Everybody should have access to the same kind of education. I feel that same. I feel the same way about job creation. It shouldn't matter that. Okay, well, I don't have a tax base. I don't have the $2 million of matching funds. But you know what? It's going to be good for the state of Mississippi. So we're going to make that investment in your area. And at some point, you can pay us back. You could even write in. You could pay us back once we start creating those opportunities in your area. And I firmly believe, because we've established. I mean, there was a time when they didn't invest anything in Northeast Mississippi, and you saw that area began to grow when they started investing in those, putting state money in those areas, and that's what it takes. It's just like we have an interest in making sure that every area has opportunity and has job growth. I was listening to Scott Waller on the way over here, and he was talking at MEC, and he was talking about he hates the idea, he hates the phrase brain drain, because there are a lot of smart and talented people who stay here and who come here. I said, well, what you're ignoring is, of course, there are a lot of smart and talented people who are here, but you can't ignore the fact that we're losing a lot at the same time, and we could keep more of those if we invested in culture and economic development. Everybody doesn't want to live in Jackson. People would love to stay in Greenville and have a small insular community where you got jobs and opportunity and you got friends and a social network and a cultural network there that people would like to stay in. And you can do that. I've seen it happen.
We've been talking about what y'all did, or what, not, when I say y'all, I mean the legislature, the whole did during the session, but I mean, we'd be remiss if we did talk about what didn't happen, and that was that was a big thing. I would argue that y'all had one job under the Constitution you're supposed to do every year, and that's
balance the budget,
fund
pass
government,
a budget,
and you didn't do that.
Yeah,
and that was the Republican leadership on both sides were arguing about. Seemed like some pretty trivial stuff in some ways, but so at some point,
can you not help mediate some of this fighting
offered.
we've seen? You've offered to help. They
I've
turned
offered
you
to
down.
help. I got beat up for trying to go and help with Medicaid expansion.
Oh, that's right.
I remember.
Talk to the lieutenant governor.
That's right. Yeah.
I said, maybe if I go in and talk to him, maybe we'll do some good.
Yeah.
They got mad at me about that. So yeah.
So what's going to happen with the budget? I mean, at some point the governor's going to call a special session. Are you hearing anything about what's going to be in the special session call? And
well, what I've heard is that I've heard the governor may call it next week. He may call it May 15th. He may call it just before Memorial Day. Well, he may do what traditionally governors with his personality have done. They'll wait a week before the end of the fiscal year and then force us to come in and adopt whatever it is. The problem, not a problem, but the good thing is that, and I think this is true, that 80% of the budget has already been settled on. There's not much work to be done on that. But what I've heard, and which would not surprise me about the governor, is that there are some things that he wanted that he may add to the call that he'd want to press us on. And let me just I go back to my dark side. That's what I call Tate. I go to my dark side and become Tate Reeves. And I think if I wanted to make that happen, what would I do? I say, well, I'll call a special session. Say I'll call one next week. And we'll have some limited budgets. These are budgets you can take up. I won't send you these other budgets until you look at parent bill of rights. I won't make it other until you look at school choice. And I've heard he won't sports book. So I wouldn't be surprised if the governor parses it out, call us in for 2 or 3 days, take up what budgets he thinks are a priority, call us in for another session, take up 2 or 3 days. When you get those passed, and I'll let you look at these, which is not the way that you should run a budget, because you need to know what you need to see the whole picture. Mm-hmm. Or he may just be an adult and call us back and say, have y'all reached an agreement? You take a couple of days, get it done, and go home. So I don't know what he's going to do. But it wouldn't surprise me if he took this opportunity. Look, we have gifted a lame duck governor an opportunity to actually do our job and take control of what we're supposed to do. And I just find it hard to believe that he won't have a good time with that.
Yeah, y'all could have y'all could have stayed and y'all didn't have to adjourn.
No,
the session.
the session, we had time. We had time.
Yeah.
We had more than enough time. Yes.
Yeah.
If we didn't do anything, if we went home, we could have left it on paper and allowed ourselves to come back when we got ready. We've done that. We did that a few years ago.
The COVID year, y'all were in session almost all year long.
All year, right.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to leave it up. I don't know if anybody ever said this publicly, but when I talked to the House leadership, they didn't want to leave it up to the governor to decide when we're going to come back. When they wanted to be able to do that when they saw that certain needs had been met. Yeah.
I don't know if it was said publicly, but that was pretty obvious from, from what was going on.
Yeah.
The governor himself alluded to a potential economic development incentives being thrown in. You heard any more?
I haven't heard any more about that, but that wouldn't surprise me. Some of that was what was seen to be taking a route before we left the session. I'd heard rumors about something like that about to happen. So that may be what he's waiting on. And if that's true, that'd be great. I mean, anytime we can have an economic development project in the state of Mississippi, that's great. I tell people, even though I'd like to see it in areas that have been neglected, the more you do it other places, the more I feel like we can make the case you need to, okay, you've done enough there, let's come over here and do it. And, to the governor's credit, if I remember correctly, I don't remember things as well as I used to, but last year I think he established that fund I was talking about, and he said one of his focuses would be to do more economic development in the Delta. He said that. So I hope he keeps his word.
When y'all do come back in special session, I mean, I know you have a limited voice on what happened, but what would you like to see happen? Are there any priorities you'd like to see in the budget that you'll be pushing for?
Well, I would. I mean, my focus is. I always believe you start with infrastructure. I'd like to make sure that we fund transportation in a way that's going to be, because I think that's important to every area. You can't make a case for economic development or better schools if your roads and your water, sewer, and all those things are in bad shape. So I'd like to make sure we do that. We talk a lot about first responders and public safety, but we don't give them any money. We don't help areas that need. We reinforce or we help places on infrastructure, economic development, but there are areas that need better equipment for the policemen and firemen. They need a higher pay, a better training. And I would like to see us, and we talk about this all the time, and that's something that could happen during our special session if we did it through the Department of Public Safety or we did it through some local grants that we could do. I'd like to see that happen. But education, transportation, and public safety, I'd like to see us make sure that we prioritize making sure those things are fortified. Now, everybody likes to talk about the retirement system and what we need to do for the retirement system. And I continue to tell people that, state leaders who run on this idea, we cut 2,200 jobs from state government. And people think that means that they shrunk the cost of government. And the truth is, anybody who knows how government works, those jobs didn't go away. They went into the private sector, to private contractors that are doing the jobs, whether you're talking about private prisons, whether you're talking about child support. All those jobs are jobs that didn't go away. We're just paying somebody else to do them, and those people are not in our retirement system, and they don't have the health benefits that we offered under state employees. So when we talk about what needs to happen, especially with the retirement system, sure, if we don't cut taxes, we could give them $150 million a year. But we also could start canceling some of these private contracts and putting these people back to work and having more people pay into the retirement system. I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, the peer says that's one of the main issues, the reason the retirement system is not doing as well as it should do.
Some expert actually said that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It was just common sense.
They don't talk. They don't talk about that much when they talk about what needs to be done with peer. But
Yeah.
I mean with PERS.
Yeah.
But that's peer said that.
Yeah. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, a few weeks now from the end of the session, one thing the governor said this time, and he said it about previous special sessions, he doesn't want to call people back in until they have some agreement or whatever.
Yeah.
Any idea of whether the Senate and
I'm in
House
Jackson.
leadership's getting any closer, any calm down, getting along any better?
I don't know how well they're getting along. I do know that I've heard rumors around the Capitol. I'm in Jackson 3 to 4 days, 5 days a week sometimes, and so I've been by the Capitol, and every day I've been by the Capitol, the lieutenant governor and the speaker have been at the Capitol, and I didn't see them together, but I hope that meant that they were somewhere talking and working something out. And people have told me that they at least are getting together now and talking, and so but again, before they left. Before the end of the insane bickering started, they had agreed on 80 to 85% of the budget anyway. So I think they pretty much have an agreement. But I did hear that there's still people who are saying, well, I still don't want to talk about everything in the budget until we have some more conversations about school choice and sports betting, which is I still find to be insane.
Sports betting, that's been number one with a bullet.
I know,
folks,
and I just don't think it has the kind of support that you ought to be hanging the passive of a budget on. I just don't.
What's your position on that issue? I mean, you have casinos in your district, or at least a casino.
I have a casino, right?
But you've argued that what they're trying to do would actually hurt your casino.
It would hurt my casino. It would hurt the smaller casinos.
Yeah.
The way they've set it up, and I asked them to change that. Is that you're gonna have all the sports betting platforms that want to come here can come here, but they only have to license with two land-based casinos could have all the licenses, which means that all the revenue from sports betting that comes in the state of Mississippi would go through those one or two casinos. It could be one casino would be would capture all those platforms' revenue, and they're not getting all the revenue, but as a casino, they have to be licensed with a land-based, with a local casino. What I suggested to them was that if you can geo-fence the entire state of Mississippi, which means that if you are betting in the state of Mississippi, they can tell you're not in Louisiana making this bet, you're in Mississippi making this bet. That money stays here. Then you could section off areas of the state. If you're in the Natchez casino area, then that geofence says that money comes to the Natchez casino. If you're in the Vicksburg area, it goes there. That's the fair way to make sure that no matter we get a lot of tourists coming to Natchez. If they're going to be sports betting on their phone, I don't want the money going to the Beau Rivage in Biloxi. I want it to stay in Natchez, and that's all we asked them to do. But people, everything in government and business has gotten to be that everybody's so selfish. Everybody wants it all, and so that was one that didn't happen. But beyond that, I've also looked at what happens. I told somebody if I was here when they passed casinos in '92, I would have voted for it. But after I saw what it did to my town and to the people who live there, if you're in an isolated area like Natchez, or anywhere where people have access to a casino and that's all the entertainment, I feel like that's the same that happens when people betting on their phone. It's just a dangerous thing in terms of it destroys people's lives. I'm gonna tell you, there were reputable, well-standing members of my community who lost homes, cars, and simply because they couldn't stop going down there and pulling that lever. And so I see the dangers in gambling. And I've read enough articles to know that, and I saw one guy would just have his finger on his button he would just be walking and just betting. He didn't care what he did. He just keep betting. He just kept rolling. He couldn't even see it. And I mean, this internet gambling is a serious, serious problem. So for that reason, health reasons, I'm not for it. But if we're going to have it, at least let the money stay where the betting is taking place.
Yeah, y'all, the legislature over the past 10 years or so expanded a lot of the so-called syntax issuok greatly.
I know. A state is
wine shipped to your house now.
Look, we're gonna be drunks and gamblers all over the state. Look, we had that no-fault divorce bill that got a lot of traction. Which I in fact one year I co-authored, and when I got home, I like to not have anywhere to sleep. My wife, what are you working on a no-fault divorce bill for? I said, well, I just did. Somebody asked me. Really, it was just by request. But I said that to say that in a state that is conservative and as Christian right as this state is, we do pass a lot of sin-type laws that allow a lot of things you wouldn't think would happen here.
Well, I guess we'll know hopefully here soon what's going to happen next with the session. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to see addressed?
I just like we talk about things we didn't do. I find it amazing that in a state, in a leadership that believes in freedom, that we won't even entertain the idea of a ballot initiative. I just, it was one of the things in this past election cycle before we came back that people said, that's what we got to have. We got to have that. And we have managed to not even talk about it. And given our new leadership in Washington, even though I think we still should be discussing Medicaid expansion, we don't even talk about that either. So I just, those two things I find very strange.
Well, let me, along with the issue of leadership in Washington, let me ask you before we wrap up. I wrote a little bit about this on the DEI, the effort that the states, the legislature passed a bill that to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Yeah.
And I wrote about the fact, and I know that most of the Democrats and African American members of the legislature voted against that, but I do think it was still kind of telling that when they formed a conference committee to work out those details of that bill, which they should have done on the tax bill to regress, that there was no African American members of that on that conference committee. And I had members say, well, they were against it, so why should they be on the tax committee? In the old days, you would have members who might have a different opinion who could provide at least some input and a different thought into that process, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
That used to be the basis of a conference committee. I can remember times when I wouldn't come back and sign a conference report, and it was important to the leadership for everybody to be on board enough that they would say, well, tell me what your problem is. You talk about it, and we'd get it worked out. And even though they didn't need my signature, they wanted everybody to be together. And we've gotten to a point now that nobody cares. And you're right. I mean, that's the conference process is built on putting together different ideas, putting different eyes on a page to say, I saw something you may not have noticed, but let's talk about that. I was on 3 conference committees, and every time I said, well, when are we going to meet? We've talked about it. You want to go and sign it? I said, well, we're not going to have any discussions. I mean, I was being tongue in cheek. I knew they wouldn't, but the idea that you have, you put me on a conference committee, but you don't want to talk to me about it. So the beauty of conferences and the beauty of the legislature is that, and the beauty of diversity, that's the whole idea, that you get different eyes, different opinions, and you come to something that everybody can live with. And when you do away with that, it's not helpful to our culture and to our society.
And even if you don't sign it, I mean, they can still pass it.
They can still pass it,
and even I can make the case that if you were on that DEI committee, you might not sign whatever they come up with, but you could still provide some input.
You could have some discussion
that people might say, well, he has a good point. Let's change this particular, and you can reach at least maybe a little common ground.
Look, and this may not seem related, but we were trying to pass an economic development package a while back up in Marshall County. I made some amendments, not to kill the bill. One amendment was that they had to commit to 70% of the workforce coming from Mississippi or living in Mississippi, because we keep our tax base, and our people you couldn't have people just crossing the border from Tennessee taking those jobs, and they wouldn't add it to the bill, but the chairman did come and say, that's something we need to start looking at and talking about. And that's what conference does. It at least gives you a different opinion, and people will begin to think about it. And I trust that idea about requiring companies to hire a certain percentage of Mississippians is going to show up in some piece of legislation. And it wasn't an original idea. Other people have talked about doing that too. But if you keep those kind of discussions going, and if you have them involved in the conference process, it just makes us smarter and better. We get better legislation.
I think we've seen conference replaced by caucus.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it was you all. Somebody brought to the attention that we don't take up legislation unless it's approved by the Republican caucus, and if that's how we're passing legislation, then those should not be closed meetings because you're making that determination. They determine whether or not we even take up a bill based on what comes out of the Republican caucus. So yeah, that's what we replaced it with.
We appreciate you coming in, and may try and get you back soon. I'm sure we're going to be.
I got a lot more to talk about.
Right. Well, yeah, I know we could have covered another 20 topics.
Part two.
Part two. We'll have you back.
And I'll
for
be glad to
parts
come back.
2 and 3 here soon, and I guess we'll be back here for a special session at some point before June.
Yeah, before June.
Before July.
July.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you all for having me.
coming on.
As usual, I enjoyed it, and these discussions are helpful to me, and I hope they're helpful to other people as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.